don't know me, my name is Aiden, and just like everybody else, Stranger Things has been lodged in my brain for the past month and a half. And if you can't tell based on everything about me, I love Eddie Munson. There will be spoilers in this video for Stranger Things Season 4's Volume 1 and 2. If you haven't seen it yet, get out. I take no responsibility if you spoil yourself. Now, whether or not this is a popular opinion or an unpopular opinion, I don't know anymore, but I was not the biggest fan of Stranger Things Season 4. What I will say is that one of the saving graces of Season 4 for me was the new character that was introduced, Eddie Munson. Eddie Munson is a two-time super senior weed and ketamine selling metalhead who plays Dungeons and Dragons, so naturally everybody loves him. Now when I say I have a problem with Eddie Munson, I'm gonna give it to the Duffer Brothers right now. It's less to do with his actual character. I think Eddie is a really well-written character. I think he's really interesting. I mean, the fan response just goes to show that there are things that people relate to when it comes to Eddie and his story and his arc. Overall, I think Eddie was a really well-written character, which is why I'm so upset that his death sucked. More specifically, I hate the way he died, and I hate the I don't run character arc for him because I don't think it fits well. And that's what we're going to be discussing today. So take a seat, get some Eggo waffles and new Coke, and we're gonna talk about my problem with Eddie Munson.
Those stains are, I don't know what those stains are.
Okay, before we talk about Eddie Munson's death itself, because I don't necessarily think him dying is a bad thing, I want to talk about his character arc. I understand what the Duffers were going for, this whole, I always run from everything, I'm so sick of running, I'm such a coward.
So, I did the thing that I do now, apparently. I ran.
I just don't like it. I think there could have been a lot more interesting ways to dive into Eddie's character and more interesting arcs that he could have gone through. For starters, I don't think Eddie has a problem when it comes to running from things that scare him. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, he doesn't really run from anything until there's a literal floating corpse in his house, and personally, I would have booked it. I don't think that's some fatal flaw that he has to overcome. Like, that's scary. Before that, he actively confronted his bullies at school. He created his own D&D club and is an active member of a band despite the fact that he's bullied and harassed for it. He actively provides safe spaces for younger kids at school and takes them under his wing. He also stands up against their bullies as well. And he seems genuinely passionate and excited about graduating school. It doesn't feel like he's given up on himself when it comes to 86 being his year, despite the fact that everybody around him has so obviously given up on him.
It's my year. I can feel it. 86, baby.
None of those things feel like him running. He draws attention to himself by being weird in order to have agency over what people bully him for. But genuinely, I don't think he has a problem with running. I think he is somebody who is very confident in who he is and stands strong in who he is and doesn't let people around him threaten him or make him back down from who he is. He's very much his authentic self. He very much refuses to conform despite the fact that it would probably make his life easier, and I think those are all very brave things. And to be completely honest, I also don't think it's a detriment to him as a person to run from the things that he's running from. A corpse levitated in his living room and snap, crackle, popped. I would have booked it. I would have been gone. And after that, he is running from people who quite literally want him dead. I don't think it's cowardly for him to run from those things. I think it is strategic and necessary for his own survival, and the show agrees with me because the moment he stops running, he dies. The show keeps telling us running is a bad thing. It keeps telling us Eddie's a coward for running, but it shows us that if you don't run, you die. What the show is telling us and what the show is showing us are conflicting with each other.
There is no shame in running.
You tell us running is a bad thing, but you show us that if you don't run, you are met with a terrible fate. But Aiden, running is his whole character arc. What is he supposed to do if he doesn't have that arc that he resolves? I've written a few replacement character arcs for him. Let's talk about them. For starters, I think it would have been a lot more interesting for Eddie's character arc to surround the idea of survivor's guilt. Because at the end of the day, there was nothing at that point in time that he could have done to save Chrissy when she died. By the time he ran away from the trailer, she was already long gone. There was no particular reason why Chrissy was even chosen by Vecna. We see in Vecna's head that there are thousands of people that he could latch onto. Chrissy is just the one that happened to be unlucky. It could have very well been Eddie, it could have very well been anyone else, but it wasn't. The fact that he survived for no logical reason after having to watch somebody brutally die is something that he would have to grapple with. You could even keep his guilt and regret of running away and leaving Chrissy's body, but instead of resolving that arc by having him not run and then die, why. You could have resolved that arc by him eventually having to do the much harder thing, which is accept, understand, and move on from the fact that there was nothing he could have done. I think it would have been really compelling and interesting to see that. And with a show like Stranger Things, tackling survivor's guilt just would have fit really well into the narrative of the story. Another arc that I think would have gone really well with the survivor's guilt type arc, and I think would have bounced really well with the idea of him being hunted by Jason and the rest of the town, is moments where he considers conforming or tries to conform to the societal norm in Hawkins in an attempt to kind of save himself. And him running could be a metaphor more for him running from his authentic self and his authentic expression in an attempt to keep himself safe, even though keeping himself safe in that way means that he's not truly being who he is.
It's forced conformity. That's what's killing the kid!
And I think it would have been really interesting, especially since so much of his character is based in the satanic panic, to show that no matter how much effort he puts into trying to conform, there will always be aspects of himself that people around him can use as a scapegoat. He's a super senior, he's lower class, he's often interpreted as being queer. It could have been really interesting to see how certain people are put at an inherent disadvantage when it comes to situations like this.
Society has to blame something. We're an easy target.
Now, no matter how much he tries to conform, there will always be aspects of his authentic self that don't fit into their ideal idea of what a human should be. After all, it is a very clear reference to the Satanic Panic, which was a real event that happened in history. Eddie Munson himself is based off of Damien Eccles, somebody part of the West Memphis 3, a very famous murder trial. The Satanic Panic demonized and attacked subcultures, but it was also used to demonize and attack marginalized groups of people. It's no coincidence that the specific subcultures it chose to target are subcultures that had high populations of queer people, people of color, neurodivergent people, lower class people. These are things that Eddie or people like Eddie can't just change with a snap of their fingers.
Sodomy, suicide, and even murder.
Especially when you keep in mind that Jason and the people hunting Eddie are conservative religious right-wingers. Perhaps by the end of the story, he learns to accept himself authentically again. That being his authentic self and finding a support system of people that accept him for that authentic self is essential and necessary when it comes to survival and dealing with trauma. Because while I appreciate that the Satanic Panic was brought up in Stranger Things, I feel like it was not used as much as it could have been. I feel like there was so much potential to dive into deeper issues that the show just didn't use. There are so many wasted opportunities and wasted potential that the show could have done some really interesting stuff with, and then it just didn't. So yeah, those are my replacements for Eddie Munson's character arc. You quite literally don't have to change anything about his character, his morals, his personality, even what he feels guilty for. You just have them pay off in different ways. I really think there was some wasted potential when it comes to Eddie's character arc and how they used the Satanic Panic within the world of Stranger Things.
Madonna, Blondie, Bowie, Beatles, music! We need music!
This is music!
Speaking of wasted potential, let's talk about Eddie Munson's actual death and not just the implications of his character arc, because what was that? I think just like the mass majority of the people who watch the show, I'm not even necessarily upset that Eddie died, because to be completely honest, we all kind of expected it. His first introduction, he gets on a table and he's like, this is gonna be my year.
86, baby.
And we all just kind of knew that it wasn't. And then they kept pushing this plot line of him always running, and we're like, okay, he's a goner. What I am more upset about is the way that he died, because I don't think it fits the character arc they were trying to do. I feel like it was kind of rushed. There wasn't a lot of emotional payoff. I just expected more from it, and I'm kind of upset because he was a really good character, and the way they got rid of him was just really lame. For starters, I don't like that he was attacked by the bats, and I'm going to bring up Steve being attacked in Volume 1 by the bats, but I'm not saying, oh, Steve survived the bat attack, so Eddie should have survived the bat attack. Like, no, we watched the attack. His legs got like completely chewed off, like he's gone. So it's not me saying, oh, Steve survived, so Eddie should have because the attack was the same. It's me saying it's kind of boring to watch an attack that you've already seen. This is one of the same problems that I have with Vecna being our main villain, is it's really scary when Chrissy dies, but then everybody else just dies the same way, so it kind of loses its emotional impact the more it happens. I can kind of say the same thing about Eddie's death, is we've already watched someone get attacked by the bats and survive, so we're watching him get attacked and the stakes just feel really low. Also, not to mention the fact that the mass majority of his final fight is off screen because it's constantly switching back and forth between him and Steve and Nancy and Robin, Hopper getting attacked by the Demi-Dogs, and Max. There's just so much going on. Eddie Munson is fighting for his life and he literally dies, and the mass majority of that fight is off screen. So we don't even get like a big build up. We go back back and forth between 5 different clips over and over again, and then every single person survives except one. It feels really weird to me. Like, you'd think if it's his final fight and his final big heroic moment, you would show it on screen a little bit more. And speaking of heroic moments, it wasn't even heroic. I'm not even talking about Eddie going back into the Upside Down and leaving Dustin, because I understand that his objective was to lead the bats away. What I'm more specifically talking about is when he's running and he stops and he turns around and he fights the bats. I know why he's stopping. It's because his character arc is like, oh, he's always running and he runs. No, that doesn't make any sense. Running in this scenario would have been objectively better. His goal was to lead the bats away. The more you run, the farther away you get. Worst case scenario, the more he runs, the farther he leads the bats away, which is his goal. Best case scenario, he leads them farther away and survives, because the bats quite literally die like 5 minutes after he does. If he had been running for 5 more minutes, the bats all would have dropped dead because Murray shot the demi-dogs with his flamethrower. Granted, he as a character doesn't know that, but we as an audience watch it happen, so we as an audience don't get that emotional payoff. We don't get a lot of payoff because he's not even the one who defeats the bats. I cannot... At the end of the day, as much as I love Eddie and want to say he died a hero, he really didn't. Choosing to stop running was not brave. It was stupid. He didn't save himself or anyone else. Dustin was already safe back in the regular world. Steve, Nancy, and Robin were on the other side of the Upside Down, far away from the bats. Eddie was completely alone. So having Eddie's character arc of I don't run and I feel guilty for it end with him finally not running and then immediately being punished by death does not make any sense. Especially when him not running didn't actually have any long-term consequences on any of the other characters. Not only does his death suck, but there's not a lot of emotional response to it. Example, season 3, Billy dies. I could not care less. I really don't like Billy. I don't think he's a good person. I personally am not a fan of redemption deaths. I think redemption arcs are always better because if they die, they can't actually prove they became a better person. I really didn't care when Billy died, but Billy's death is still really sad because of the impact that it has on Max and the impact that has on the rest of the party. When it comes to Eddie, not only did his death suck, but literally nobody acknowledges the fact that he died, aside from Dustin and Wayne. And I just have so many questions. Does Mike know that Eddie died? When Mike gets off that pizza van at the very end after the 2 days later and hugs everybody, he doesn't know Eddie's dead. He doesn't even know Eddie's involved in all of this. Is anybody gonna tell him? Steve's last words to Eddie is something along the lines of, don't try to be a hero.
Don't try to be cute or be a hero or something, okay? You guys are just
decoys. Don't worry, you can be the hero, Steve.
Absolutely. I mean, look at us. We are not heroes.
And then Eddie dies trying to be a hero, and we don't see Steve's reaction to that at all. I already have a problem with the fact that we don't see how Nancy, Robin, Steve, and Dustin got out of the Upside Down, but Dustin's sitting there cradling Eddie's dead body 50 feet away from the portal I'm assuming they're going to use to get out of the Upside Down. Meaning that Nancy, Robin, and Steve would have had to walk past Dustin, or at least walk close enough to Dustin to see him there, holding Eddie's dead body. I want a scene where they see Dustin sitting there sobbing and have to drag him away from Eddie's body while Dustin tries to explain what happened. I want all of them to be deeply and emotionally affected by this. Just imagine him sitting there holding Eddie and they have to keep trying to convince Dustin, like, we have to get out, we have to get out, we have to get out, and he doesn't want to, and he's screaming and they quite literally have to pull him out of the Upside Down. Meanwhile, Steve and Nancy and Robin, who have become close friends with Eddie over the course of the past week, have to try to stay strong and mature for Dustin's sake, but they're not very good at it. That scene would have been so good. I need a scene where somebody has to tell Mike that Eddie, one of his best friends from high school, somehow got involved in all of this without Mike even knowing, and now Eddie's dead. We don't see a reaction to that at all. Instead, we get 2 days later. You expect me to believe that Eddie Munson died and Max is in a coma and everybody's just like chilling at the donation center. Anyway, those are all my problems with Eddie's death. I feel like there was wasted potential. I feel like it goes against the message they were trying to have. I feel like we didn't get emotional enough arcs in both a lead up to his death and also a reaction to how he died, or a reaction to his death from other characters. But you might be thinking, Aidan, stop complaining. It's a $1 billion franchise. It's not like you can do better.
That was fun. Shit.
I can do better. And I have. I have written 5 alternate endings for Eddie Munson, with a few minor adjustments to the Metallica solo and the Bat battle. 5 alternate endings. You can pick and choose pieces from them that you like. A little mix and match if you will. But I'm gonna explain my 5 alternate endings for Eddie Munson, and I personally think all of them are better. First of all, I think for the Metallica solo, instead of putting the speakers right next to Eddie and Dustin, I think they should have used that really long extension cord they have and put the speakers like a little bit away from them, and then when all the bats fly at the speakers, they set them on fire. Instead of leading the bats directly to you, lead them somewhere else and explode that place, because we know the bats don't like fire. Alternatively, if you don't want to do that, when Eddie jumps back into the Upside Down, before he goes to fight the bats, he rummages through his little trailer. And what does he find? A lighter. Why? He's a stoner. Of course he has a lighter. What else does he find? Hairspray. Why? Have you seen his hair? Of course he uses hairspray. It was the 80s. Runs to fight the bats, and when he turns around, instead of using a literal wooden circle with spikes, he takes the lighter, flicks it, takes the hairspray, burns all the bats to a crisp. Burns all the bats to a crisp. It would have been so cool. Now to my edits of Eddie Munson's actual death. Alternative ending number 1. Literally almost the exact same thing happens, except Dustin never safely makes it out of the Upside Down. When the bats start attacking, they're attacking both Eddie and Dustin. And Eddie's final moment of not running is him physically jumping in front of Dustin and saving him from a bat that ends up killing Eddie in the process. He could have died the exact same way. He could have had his I'm not running moment. He could have been killed by the same monsters in the same setting. But then he actually could have died being a hero, because he would have actually saved somebody. Because if he hadn't made that jump, Dustin would be dead. Because as of now, Eddie didn't really die for anything. His death and his final fight didn't have any long-term consequences on anything going on. Number 2, I think it's very weird that they had Steve, Nancy, Robin, and Eddie all in the Upside Down. I feel like they should have split up the older kids a little bit more. Like, why are they all one group? Maybe put one of the older kids with Lucas, Max, and Erica, because Erica's like 11 years old. Maybe you shouldn't have the youngest member of a group have no older members of the group with them. So Eddie is with Lucas and Max when Jason shows up, and instead of his not running being from a bat, his not running moment is trying to confront Jason about what happened with Chrissy, and Jason is the one who ends up killing him. His not running moment would have been him not running from the people who are hunting him down, and instead standing strong and trying to prove his innocence and prove that he is a good person. That would have been a really emotional moment. Rewrite number 3, I think everything can happen exactly how it did in the Upside Down, except he does not choose to go back down and defeat the bats. Him and Dustin make it safely out of the Upside Down, and then he's killed by Jason. It can have the same sort of character arc and development as his death if he was with Lucas in the house, like I said before, but I think it would have been a really good way to subvert our expectations, because, you know, once a character makes it out of the Upside Down, you expect them to be safe. He did it. He survived. He got out of the Upside Down, and then he's immediately killed by Jason. Similar to how Bob dies in season 2, we really think he's safe because he made it out of the lab, and then he's immediately killed. It's similar to that idea. Number 4, this isn't really a death, but this is more of a, what if Eddie was still alive? I personally think it would have been really interesting to see Hawkins have to grapple with the fact that they manhunted a innocent young adult. Again, like I said before, I think survival guilt would have been a really interesting character arc for Eddie. I don't think survival guilt is an effective arc if you don't survive. Part of his arc is learning to live with the trauma he witnessed, learning to live and move on and accept the fact that it could have been him, but it wasn't. You can't have guilt for surviving if you don't survive. So I think there could have been lots of really interesting things to do with Eddie's character without killing him at all. Granted, I do think the Duffer Brothers need to kill characters because there are just too many people to keep track of, but if they wanted to keep him alive, I think there would have been interesting things they could have done with that. Honestly, I think it might have even been better for them to kill Steve instead. I think it would have had a much bigger emotional impact because Steve has been a main character for so long, and it was obviously unintentional, but they kind of set Eddie up to be almost a replacement for Steve. He's an older mentor type figure who has a close relationship with the younger members of the party, particularly Dustin. He's forming a close friendship with Robin through some sort of shared understanding.
Hunt the freak, right?
Exactly.
And then finally, my fifth rewrite is that his death doesn't matter, that he truly does die for nothing, and that is why his death is emotional. That not everybody can die a hero, and some people just get caught in the crossfire. Having Eddie die for no reason, and having the fact that it was for no reason be acknowledged by the party could have been a really interesting way to go about it. So yeah, that's my really big rant on Eddie Munson. I love his character. I'm not necessarily upset that he died, I'm more upset in the way that he died, and I feel like there was a lot of wasted potential to kill him in a better way, or keep him alive and explore some of the things he represents more in depth. Do I think they're gonna bring him back for season 5? Not really. As much as I miss Eddie and as much as I think he was one of the saving graces of season 4, which is a season I'm not a big fan of, I really think the Duffer Brothers need to start killing characters. There are just too many damn characters to keep track of. The Duffer Brothers have also brought back too many characters that were supposedly dead, and every single time that you bring back a character, the stakes lower, because every time someone dies, you think, oh, well, they can always just come back. That being said, do I think it's completely above the Duffers to bring him back? Not necessarily. I'm a pretty strong believer that the Duffers do take fan reactions into account when it comes to writing the seasons. I think that's part of the reason Steve is such a big character, is because people saw audiences' reactions to him and then thought it was worth it to make his character more relevant and more important. I don't necessarily think the Duffers are above seeing people's reaction to Eddie and then bringing him back because they know people like him. But yes, those are all my thoughts on Eddie Munson. Please let me know your thoughts down in the comments section down below. I can't stop thinking about Stranger Things, so I will probably read all of them and respond because it's stuck in my brain. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in next week's video. Bye!